The Krell Dominion had ruled the outer spiral arms for 3,000 cycles, which was impressive until you realized they'd spent 2,900 of those cycles arguing about proper plasma rifle etiquette. Such was the nature of advanced civilization in the galaxy. Everyone had conquered physics, mortality, and interstellar travel. But nobody could agree on whether energy weapons should be charged to stun or kill at formal gatherings. The galaxy operated on a simple principle that every species understood from the moment they achieved faster-than-light travel. Might makes right, and might comes from superior technology. Biological evolution was considered a quaint starting point, something you grew out of like a larval stage or a regrettable fashion choice. The moment a species figured out how to replace flesh with duralloy, neurons with quantum processors, and frail organic chemistry with elegant machinery, they did so without hesitation. The Confederation of Sentient Species maintained detailed rankings of every civilization based on their military capability, technological sophistication, and most importantly, how thoroughly they'd abandoned their embarrassing biological origins. At the top sat the Nexari Collective, beings who'd uploaded their consciousness into crystalline matrices powered by miniature stars, piloting bodies that could reconfigure themselves at the molecular level. They looked down on everyone else with the smug superiority of people who'd literally transcended having opinions about lunch. At the bottom, receiving the galactic equivalent of participation trophies and pitying head pats, sat humanity. Humans had arrived on the galactic stage approximately 40 cycles ago with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for tourists who'd taken a wrong turn and ended up somewhere they definitely shouldn't be. They'd figured out faster-than-light travel through what the galaxy's scientific community could only describe as aggressive stubbornness and mathematical blasphemy, then promptly introduced themselves to the Confederation by accidentally ramming a Krell warship during their first diplomatic mission. The incident had set the tone for humanity's entire galactic reputation. What made humans the subject of universal mockery wasn't their technological backwardness, though that certainly didn't help. The Krell had weapons that could crack planets. Humans still used chemical propellants that made loud noises and threw metal really fast. The Zintheri had replaced their bodies with adaptive biomechanical frames that could survive in hard vacuum. Humans wore pressurized suits that looked like they'd been designed by committee and sewn together by optimistic amateurs. No. What really made humanity the galaxy's favorite punchline was their stubborn, almost aggressive refusal to upgrade. Every species that achieved space travel immediately began the process of enhancing themselves. The Dravik had replaced their limbs with modular weapon systems. The Shorath had augmented their nervous systems with combat prediction algorithms. Even the peaceful Ilari had gotten cybernetic enhancements, though theirs were mostly for artistic purposes and really excellent eyesight for appreciating sunsets. Humans showed up with original equipment biology and acted like that was perfectly fine. They had no built-in weapons, no subdermal armor plating, no neural accelerators or reflex boosters. They were, as the Krell ambassador had eloquently put it during a particularly memorable Confederation session, walking meat sacks held together by stubbornness and delusion. The comment had made every newsfeed in the galaxy. Humans, displaying either remarkable dignity or profound stupidity, had simply shrugged and continued being aggressively biological. This attitude had earned them a special kind of contempt. In a galaxy where every species measured their worth by how thoroughly they'd militarized and mechanized themselves, humans were the equivalent of showing up to a war in your pajamas. Harmless, ridiculous, and not worth taking seriously. Which brought us to the contested trials. The trials were the Confederation's solution to territorial disputes, trade disagreements, and general interspecies tensions that would otherwise result in messy, economy-disrupting wars. Instead of fleets of warships reducing entire systems to radioactive rubble, species could settle their differences through single combat in designated arenas scattered across neutral space. It was civilized. It was efficient. It was also incredibly violent. But the galaxy had decided that some violence was acceptable, as long as it happened in designated locations with proper advertising revenue. The trials took place in massive orbital arenas, each one a technological marvel capable of reconfiguring its internal environment to suit any combat scenario. Gravity could be adjusted, atmospheres could be customized, terrain could shift from volcanic hellscapes to frozen tundras at the press of a button. Millions watched via Neuralink broadcasts, placing bets through quantum-encrypted channels while commentators provided running analysis in 7,000 languages simultaneously. Champions represented their species' honor, their civilization's superiority, and occasionally their government's foreign policy objectives. These warriors were the pinnacle of their respective species' capabilities. Bodies upgraded with the finest military hardware, minds enhanced with tactical processing suites, armed with weapons that made physics professors weep. Losing in the trials was considered a profound embarrassment. Losing badly could affect trade agreements, territorial claims, and your species' ranking in the Confederation's complex social hierarchy. Humans had competed in the trials exactly 3 times. They'd lost 3 times. Not close losses either. Humiliating, brutal defeats that had generated memes, comedy sketches, and at least one opera that played to sold-out audiences across the Krell Dominion. The human representatives had been brave, certainly, and showed admirable resilience in the face of overwhelming force, which was a polite way of saying they got comprehensively destroyed by opponents who barely broke a sweat. The betting pools didn't even accept wagers on human victories anymore. The odds were considered too depressing. So when the Confederation received notification that humanity was entering a champion in the upcoming trials, the galaxy's reaction could be summarized as, "Oh, this should be hilarious." The trials were being held at the Crucible, an ancient arena orbiting a neutron star in the Kelvis system. The Crucible had hosted over 10,000 official matches and had never once suffered a mechanical failure, which was impressive considering the amount of energy weapons fire it absorbed on a regular basis. Its internal space could comfortably hold 50,000 spectators, though attendance for this particular match was expected to be lower. Nobody wanted to watch humans lose again. Well, nobody except the people who found it funny, which admittedly was most of the galaxy. The arena filled slowly over the course of several hours. Dravic warriors occupied the upper sections, their mechanical limbs gleaming under the carefully calibrated lighting. Krell dignitaries sat in their private boxes, already drinking and making jokes at humanity's expense. Zintheri spectators interfaced directly with the arena's sensory network, experiencing the space through data streams rather than merely watching it. The betting pools opened 3 hours before the match. Human victory sat at odds of approximately 8,000 to 1, which was actually generous considering their track record. Most of the serious money went toward betting on how quickly the human would lose, with the over-under set at 90 seconds. The human representative arrived with no fanfare, no entrance music, no light show, no projected holograms or atmospheric effects. She simply walked through the fighter's entrance into the preparation chamber, and the cameras caught her almost by accident. She was female, which the galaxy noted with mild interest. Human gender distinctions were considered quaint but meaningless. Most species had either abandoned sexual dimorphism entirely or had so many genders that keeping track required specialized database software. She stood approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall, which translated to roughly average human height and was considered almost comically small by galactic standards. Her build was athletic in the way humans measured such things, with visible muscle definition that organic species recognized and cybernetic species found adorably primitive. She wore simple clothing, flexible pants, a fitted shirt, and boots designed for mobility rather than protection. No armor, no visible weapons, no cybernetic enhancements breaking the skin surface, no energy field generators, no plasma projectors, nothing. Her hands were empty. Her skin was brown, her hair dark and pulled back functionally. Her expression was calm, almost bored, like someone waiting for a transportation connection rather than preparing for potentially lethal combat. The commentators noticed her first. "And here we have humanity's champion," said Vrick 7, a Nexari consciousness inhabiting a commentary platform, their voice resonating through 17 different frequency bands simultaneously. "I'm accessing her registration data now, and I'm seeing absolutely nothing interesting. No augmentation profile, no weapons manifest, no specialized training certifications. Did humans send the wrong person?" "Perhaps this is a cultural gesture," offered Kilreth, a Shorath analyst whose 6 eyes blinked in sequential patterns. "Some species perform ritual humiliation as bonding exercises. Maybe humans are attempting to demonstrate humility by getting their representative killed? I've studied humans. Their social behaviors rarely make sense." The camera feeds focused on the human, and across the galaxy, millions of viewers tuned in specifically to see what fresh humiliation humanity had prepared. Social media networks lit up with commentary, 98% of it variations on the same theme. This was going to be a massacre. The human seemed unaware of the attention, or more likely, completely unbothered by it. She stretched casually, rolling her shoulders and cracking her knuckles in a gesture that organic species recognized as preparing for physical activity and cybernetic species found mystifying. Then the champion's entrance opened on the opposite side of the arena. Vexithor, the undefeated, emerged to thunderous applause. He stood 9 feet tall, and every inch of that height was deliberate engineering. His species, the Corvinai, were already large by galactic standards, but Vexithor had enhanced himself far beyond biological baseline. His arms had been replaced with military-grade combat prosthetics capable of crushing duralloy like soft clay. His legs were hydraulic masterpieces that could launch him 50 feet vertically or let him sprint at speeds that turned him into a flesh and metal blur. His torso was more machine than organic, layered with armor plating that could deflect small arms fire and shrug off energy blasts. His spine had been reinforced with a power distribution network that fed his various augmentations. His skull housed a combat computer that processed tactical information faster than most species could think. He was armed, extensively. Plasma projectors were integrated into his forearms, capable of firing sustained beams that could melt through starship hulls. His shoulders mounted micro-missile launchers with sophisticated targeting systems. His hands could deploy monomolecular blades that vibrated at frequencies designed to slice through molecular bonds. His eyes had been replaced with targeting arrays that saw in 17 spectrums simultaneously. He was, by any reasonable measure, a walking weapon platform. He was also undefeated in 47 consecutive matches. Vexithor had broken champions from a dozen species. He'd humiliated warriors who'd spent centuries perfecting their combat abilities. He'd turned professional fighters into medical emergencies with casual efficiency. The Corvinai hegemony paid him in his own weight in precious metals after every victory, and he was rapidly becoming too expensive to employ. He enjoyed his work tremendously. Vexithor strode to the center of the arena. his footsteps making the reinforced floor plates ring like warning bells. The crowd's cheering intensified. He raised his arms in acknowledgement, and the plasma projectors glowed with barely contained energy. The human walked to her designated starting position with the same casual energy she'd shown earlier, like this was a mild inconvenience rather than potential death. The arena's central platform rose, carrying the Arbiter, an AI construct that refereed all official matches. Its voice resonated through the space, translated simultaneously into every known language. This match is sanctioned by the Confederation of Sentient Species. Victory is achieved through opponent incapacitation, surrender, or death. Medical intervention is available. May both representatives bring honor to their species. Standard preamble. The crowd barely listened. Vexithor was staring at the human with visible contempt. His targeting systems had already scanned her, providing detailed analysis that confirmed what his eyes told him. She had nothing. No weapons, no enhancements, no defensive systems. She was as baseline as biology could get. He decided to make this entertaining. "Human," his voice boomed across the arena, amplified by his internal systems. "I am told your species has courage. I see before me no evidence of this claim." The human didn't respond, just stood relaxed with her hands at her sides. "You come before the galaxy with empty hands," Vexithor continued, playing to the crowd now. "You bring no weapons to face me, no augmentations, no courage. Tell me, do all humans have a death wish, or are you simply stupid?" The crowd laughed. It was the kind of laughter that happened when the bully was performing, and everyone knew the punchline was coming. "I have destroyed champions who carried plasma lances," Vexithor said, starting to circle. His mechanical legs made precise, measured sounds against the floor. "I have broken warriors enhanced with combat algorithms that could predict my every move. I have defeated enemies who could regenerate from catastrophic damage. And you? You bring meat and bone. This is not combat. This is extermination." Still nothing from the human. She tracked his movement with her eyes, but otherwise remained perfectly still. "Perhaps this is a joke?" Vexithor suggested. "Perhaps humanity has finally accepted their place as the galaxy's entertainment. You are here to die for our amusement, yes? To demonstrate that even the weakest species can produce someone willing to be humiliated for the cameras?" The human spoke for the first time, her voice carrying clearly despite lacking any electronic amplification. "You talk a lot." The simplicity of the statement caught Vexithor off guard for exactly half a second. Then he laughed, a deep, booming sound that his audio systems projected throughout the arena. "Defiance! How refreshing." He stopped circling and faced her directly. "Very well, human. I will make this quick. When I am finished, they will need to identify your remains through genetic sequencing. Your empty hands will accomplish nothing. Your primitive biology will fail you. And the galaxy will remember that humanity should never have left their dirt world." "That's a lot of words to say you're scared." The crowd went silent. Vexithor's combat computer immediately flagged this as a psychological tactic, an attempt to provoke emotional response and create tactical openings. He dismissed the warning. This wasn't strategy. This was desperation. "Scared?" He actually laughed again. "Of you?" "You've been talking for 3 minutes," the human observed calmly. "Most fights are over in 3 minutes. You're stalling. I am giving the audience their money's worth." "Sure." The Arbiter's voice cut through the tension. "Combatants ready. Match begins in 10 seconds. Vexithor activated his weapon systems. Plasma projectors hummed to life. Targeting arrays locked on. His combat computer ran final calculations and prepared firing solutions. He had 17 different ways to end this fight instantly, and he was genuinely uncertain which would be most impressive. The human rolled her shoulders once more and raised her hands. Her empty, unenhanced, completely biological hands. 5 seconds, the Arbiter announced. Your hands are empty, Vexthor said, unable to resist one final taunt. What do you think you will accomplish with empty hands? The human smiled. It was not a friendly expression. Guess you'll find out. 1. Begin. Vexthor opened with overwhelming force, exactly as his combat computer recommended. He launched himself forward with his enhanced legs, covering 15 feet in a single explosive movement, while simultaneously firing his plasma projectors. The twin beams carved through the air where the human had been standing. Had been. She wasn't there anymore. Vexithor's targeting systems screamed alerts. His combat computer, running at processing speeds that operated in microseconds, struggled to track movement that shouldn't have been possible. The human had moved 6 feet laterally in the time it took his plasma to cross the distance to her previous position. No species moved that fast without enhancements. Not without reflex boosters, without neural accelerators, without something mechanical assisting. She'd just moved. Vexthor recalculated and fired again, adjusting for her new position and predicted trajectory. The plasma beams lanced out with lethal precision. She ducked under them, her body bending at angles his combat computer flagged as improbable, but not impossible for human flexibility parameters. He was faster. He knew he was faster. His systems could process and react in time frames that organic neurology couldn't match. So why wasn't he hitting her? The crowd's noise had changed. The laughter had stopped. The dismissive commentary had trailed off into confused silence. This wasn't how these fights went. Humans were supposed to be slow, clumsy, limited by their primitive biology. This human moved like physics had agreed to give her personal exemptions. Vexithor adjusted tactics. He triggered his micro-missile launchers, filling the air with 12 self-guiding projectiles that would track her movements and adjust trajectory mid-flight. Impossible to dodge. The explosions alone would be lethal. The human ran, not away, toward him. She covered the distance between them faster than his combat computer had projected, moving in ways that seemed random, but somehow put her exactly where his missiles couldn't track without hitting each other. She ducked, rolled, and redirected her momentum with movements that looked effortless. 11 missiles detonated against each other in a chain reaction that rattled the arena's shields. The 12th missile she grabbed out of the air as it passed her, redirecting its trajectory with a twisting motion that sent it spiraling into the arena ceiling where it exploded harmlessly. She just caught a missile. With her hand, her unenhanced, biological, empty hand. Vexthor's combat computer provided updated threat assessment. Extreme danger. He deployed his monomolecular blades and swung with force calculated to bisect armored targets. The blades hummed through the air at speeds that created visible distortion. The human moved inside his reach, closer than his combat programming recommended for blade engagement. His swing missed by inches. She was too close now, inside the optimal range for his primary weapons. Perfect position for his secondary systems. He triggered the energy emitters in his chest plate, designed to discharge lethal voltage into opponents who attempted close combat. Enough electricity to stop organic hearts and fry neural tissue. The human's hand hit his chest plate a fraction of a second before the discharge. Hit wasn't the right word. Struck, impacted, connected with force that his armor's sensors measured and his combat computer immediately flagged as impossible. The chest plate cracked. Not scratched, not dented. Cracked. Military-grade armor designed to withstand anti-vehicle weapons developed structural fractures from a punch. An unenhanced, biological, human punch. The electrical discharge fired, grounding harmlessly through the fractured plating instead of into the target. Vex Thor's combat computer was now screaming alerts and priority sequences that bordered on panic, if combat AI could panic. He swung again with his blade, faster this time, predictive algorithms running scenarios measured in microseconds. She couldn't dodge. The physics didn't allow it. She caught his wrist. Her fingers closed around the articulated joint of his combat prosthetic, and she squeezed. The sound of crumpling metal echoed through the suddenly silent arena. His wrist, designed to exert crushing force and resist equivalent pressure, deformed like cheap aluminum. Hydraulic fluid sprayed from ruptured lines. The monomolecular blade deactivated as power couplings severed. Vex Thor pulled back, his combat computer finally providing useful tactical advice. Retreat and reassess. The human didn't let him retreat. She moved with him, staying inside his reach, making his size and weapon systems disadvantages rather than assets. Her movements were precise, efficient, and absolutely terrifying in their effectiveness. She hit him in the side. Not a wild swing. A calculated strike to a specific point where his organic tissue met mechanical augmentation, a place where armor plating was thinner to allow for flexibility. Something inside Vex Thor broke with an audible crack. Pain receptors, which he'd assumed he'd properly calibrated to ignore, suddenly informed him that several of his biological ribs had fractured. Not cracked, fractured, completely. He tried to grab her with his undamaged arm, fingers designed to crush starship hull plates reaching for her throat. She stepped into the grab, which violated every combat protocol his computer knew. You didn't step into grabs. You retreated, you dodged. You created distance. She used his momentum against him, some kind of leverage technique that his database was desperately trying to classify. His arm, his very expensive military-grade combat prosthetic arm, ended up twisted behind his own back at an angle that stressed the connection points. Then she kicked him. His legs, his powerful hydraulic legs that could launch him and support tons of weight, buckled. She'd struck the knee joint with surgical precision, and something in the hydraulic system failed catastrophically. Vex Thor went down, which had never happened in 47 matches. The crowd was absolutely silent now. Millions of viewers across the galaxy watched in stunned disbelief as the undefeated champion crashed to the arena floor with a sound like a small vehicle accident. His combat computer provided final assessment. Immediate surrender recommended. He ignored it. His pride, the organic part of him that no amount of augmentation could replace, refused to accept this. He triggered his plasma projectors again, point-blank range, impossible to miss. The human moved. She didn't just dodge. She grabbed his arm, the one with the plasma projector, and redirected it. The beam carved a molten line across the arena floor, missing her by controlled inches. Then she twisted his arm, and the plasma projector, still firing, pointed directly at his other shoulder. His own weapon carved through his own augmentation in a spray of molten metal and burning synthetic tissue. The smell was terrible. She released his arm and stepped back, finally giving him space. Vex Thor lay on the arena floor, his left arm destroyed by his own weapon, his right arm twisted and damaged, his ribs broken, one leg hydraulics failed, his chest armor cracked. His combat computer was providing damage assessments that would have been humorous if they weren't so catastrophic. The human stood over him, breathing slightly harder than when the match started, but otherwise completely undamaged. Her hands, still empty, still unenhanced, hung at her sides. Your hands. Vex Thor managed, his voice system still functioning despite everything else failing. Empty hands. Yeah, the human said. That's kind of the point. The arbiter's voice resonated through the arena. Match concluded. Victory. Human representative. The silence stretched for exactly 3 seconds. Then the arena exploded with noise. Not cheering. Not really. Confusion, shock, disbelief, and the beginning of understanding. Commentators scrambled to provide analysis of what everyone had just witnessed. Slow-motion replays ran immediately, showing the human's movements frame by frame. The betting pools imploded spectacularly. 8,000 to 1 odds paying out broke several gambling operations instantly. Medical drones descended to retrieve Vexathor, who lay staring at the arena ceiling while his combat computer ran diagnostic loops and found nothing but bad news. The human walked to the exit, still calm, still unbothered. Frick 7, the Nexari commentator, managed to find their voice first. What did we just witness? A fight, Kilreth said slowly. We just witnessed what a fight looks like when humans participate. But she had no weapons, no augmentations, nothing. She had biology, another commentator offered. Original equipment biology. The replays were being analyzed by every military database in the Confederation. The humans' movements were being studied by combat specialists who had dedicated centuries to understanding warfare. And slowly, reluctantly, the galaxy began to comprehend something they'd somehow missed. Humans had evolved as persistence predators on a death world. Their biology, their supposedly primitive, original equipment biology, was the result of millions of years of natural selection in an environment that actively tried to kill anything living on it. Their bone density, their muscle fiber composition, their neural processing speed for physical reactions, their kinesthetic awareness, their ability to track 3-dimensional motion and calculate trajectory, their skeletal structure designed around impact distribution, their cardiovascular system capable of sustaining extreme physical exertion. None of it was primitive. It was optimized. They didn't need augmentation because evolution had already performed millions of years of violent trial and error. They didn't need weapons integrated into their bodies because they'd already figured out that flexibility and adaptability were more valuable than specialized hardware. Their empty hands weren't a weakness. They were a choice. A Dravic analyst appeared on the commentary feed, his mechanical appendages gesturing at data displays. Humans' average bone density is approximately twice that of species considered galactic baseline. Their muscle tissue has unique properties that allow for explosive power generation. Their nervous system, while slower than augmented systems in processing speed, has reaction time specifically optimized for physical combat that evolved through continuous threat response. They're natural weapons, Kilreth said quietly. Not weapons, another voice corrected. Survivors. They survived their homeworld, which by any reasonable measure should have killed their entire species during development. They survived long enough to develop intelligence, society, and technology, while being physically capable of killing most megafauna on their planet with their bare hands. With their empty hands, Brick 7 added, finally understanding the irony. The human representative had reached the exit. A reporter drone intercepted her, projecting questions in standard Confederation speech. How did you defeat Vexathor without any augmentations? The human looked at the drone with mild amusement. Why would I need augmentations? But you had no weapons. She held up her hands, flexing her fingers. These are weapons. About 14 bones per hand, connected to muscles that evolved specifically for precise manipulation and impact delivery. My skeleton is designed around shock absorption and force distribution. My nervous system can calculate trajectory and timing faster than most species' combat computers for physical actions. I'm a persistence predator that evolved to chase prey until it died from exhaustion, then kill it with my bare hands if necessary. She shrugged. You all seem to think augmentation makes you stronger. Sometimes it just makes you depend on technology instead of ability. Vex Thor was piloting a weapon platform. I was just fighting. Will humanity send more representatives to the trials? Probably. Depends if people keep challenging us to fistfights. Do you have a message for the galaxy? The human thought about it for a moment, then smiled that same unsettling smile from before the match. Empty hands built everything we have. Empty hands built our cities, our ships, our civilization. We didn't augment them because they work fine as is. If you want to cover yours with weapons and armor and forget what they can actually do, that's your choice. But don't mistake our preference for biological baseline as weakness. We chose to stay human. We chose to remember what we're capable of without external help. She paused at the exit. Oh, and tell people the betting odds were insulting. 8,000 to 1? I was honestly offended. Then she left, leaving the galaxy to process what had just happened. The Confederation's military analysts would spend the next several cycles completely revising their assessment of human capabilities. The betting pools would institute new restrictions on matches involving human representatives. Vex Thor would eventually recover, though his career as an undefeated champion had ended rather definitively. And humanity's ranking in the Confederation's complex social hierarchy would be adjusted upward significantly, with a new notation added to their species profile. Approach with caution. Augmentation assessment misleading. Natural capabilities exceed initial parameters. Or as one Krell diplomat summarized more succinctly in an internal memo, the humans were scary the whole time, and we just didn't notice because they don't look scary. Update all threat assessments accordingly. Also, stop mocking them. It turns out they don't like that. The galaxy learned something valuable that day. Empty hands had built human civilization. Empty hands had climbed from caves to starships. Empty hands had survived everything Earth could throw at them and still reached for the stars. Those same empty hands had just broken the ribs of the galaxy's supposedly unbeatable champion. The irony was not lost on anyone, least of all the humans, who found the whole situation absolutely hilarious and immediately started selling merchandise that said, "Empty hands, full results," in 7,000 languages. Because if there was one thing humans loved more than proving people wrong, it was making money off the experience afterward. The galaxy was still learning that lesson too.